The survival food industry generates more than $12 billion a year. Every shelf, every paid advertisement, every sponsored channel is pointing you toward the same category of products. Freeze-dried bucket kits, emergency ration bars, commercially packaged meal systems with 25-year shelf life claims on the label. Military nutritionists, the specialists who design food systems for soldiers operating under extreme stress, sustained physical exertion, and zero-functioning supply chain. They look at what most American families are stockpiling right now, and they describe it, carefully and specifically, as a category error. Not everything in your pantry, not all preparedness products, but 9 specific categories of survival food that dominate the civilian market will fail you at the exact moment you need them most. Not gradually, not after months, on day 3, on day 8. When your energy degrades and your thinking slows, and your family starts asking why the food that was supposed to protect them is not doing its job. The survival food market is not designed to the same standard as military nutrition science. It is designed to sell product. And the products that sell best are the ones that are easiest to photograph and package and advertise, not the ones that perform best under actual crisis conditions. Today we are going through 9 of them. Not the obvious junk, not the things anyone already knows to avoid. The products with professional branding and strong review histories and serious marketing behind them. The ones that look completely legitimate. The ones that military nutrition research has specifically identified as inadequate for any scenario lasting more than 72 hours. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what to remove from your shelf and what to put there instead. The first one is going to surprise a significant number of people watching this right now, because it is probably already somewhere in their home. Commercial freeze-dried meal bucket kits. The ones with 30 days of food on the label. The ones advertised during any news cycle that contains the words shortage, disruption, or emergency. They are the single best-selling product in the civilian preparedness market, and military nutrition protocol considers them one of the least efficient investments a family can make. Here is the math that the labels obscure. A standard 30-day bucket from the most popular commercial brands delivers between 1,200 and 1,500 calories per day. The United States Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine, the organization that establishes caloric standards for soldiers, sets a minimum of 3,000 calories per day for a moderately active adult operating under stress. A child over 10 years of age in an active emergency environment requires between 1,800 and 2,200 calories per day. That means your 30-day bucket is functionally a 15-day supply at best. 12 days if you have children. The label says 30 days because it is calculated on 1,700 calorie per day assumptions, modeled on sedentary adults under no physical or psychological stress. That is not what a real emergency looks like for any family. What military logisticians use as a baseline is caloric density per dollar and caloric density per pound of storage. By both measures, commercial freeze-dried bucket kits rank near the bottom of available retail options. The replacement protocol is straightforward. Military Standard Nutrition calculates approximately 1 pound of dry food per person per day at roughly 2,200 calories per pound for a well-composed staple mix. Whole oats, hard red winter wheat, rolled oats, dried legumes, and refined coconut oil hit that density at a fraction of the cost per calorie of any branded bucket kit. You build the same shelf life. You build it for roughly 1/5 the cost. And you build it to a caloric standard that was tested in field conditions, not marketing copy. The second category catches people off guard consistently because it genuinely sounds like the most legitimate option available. Civilian meal ready-to-eat packs. The kind sold at outdoor retailers, online preparedness stores, and military surplus shops. Camouflage packaging, military-style labeling, product names that suggest direct lineage to actual military ration systems. They are not what the military uses. They are not related to what the military uses except in superficial visual design. Authentic military meal ready-to-eat rations are engineered against a performance specification maintained by the Natick Soldier Research Development and Engineering Center in Massachusetts. Each meal packet is required to deliver a minimum of 1,200 calories. The macronutrient ratios are calibrated for soldiers operating under physical and psychological stress. Sodium levels are precisely modulated to support hydration during sustained exertion. The packaging is rated for temperature variance from -60 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The shelf life claims are verified through accelerated aging protocols under field conditions. Commercial civilian meal ready-to-eat packs meet none of these specifications. They are not subject to military nutrition standards or performance testing. Many commercial products deliver between 600 and 800 calories per pack, positioned as a complete meal. The sodium ratios are not optimized for stress physiology. The packaging degrades in environments above 70 degrees faster than the label claims. The price premium on civilian meal ready-to-eat products is paid for branding, not performance. Military families who understand what actual military rations require do not purchase them. The actual replacement, a combination of commercially canned protein, dried staples and whole fat sources, costs substantially less and delivers substantially more against every nutritional metric that matters in a sustained scenario. Number 3 is recommended in almost every basic preparedness guide still published today, which is part of why it is so persistently misused. Emergency calorie bars, vacuum-sealed packs, 3-day food supply branding, the 5-year shelf life format that sits in emergency kits across millions of homes. The Federal Emergency Management Agency includes them in its recommended basic preparedness kit, and that recommendation has given them a legitimacy that their original design specification does not support. Emergency calorie bars were engineered by the United States Coast Guard for short-duration maritime survival scenarios. The design brief was explicit: keep a person alive and minimally functional for 72 hours while awaiting rescue. That is the full scope of their intended application. The nutritional profile reflects that narrow design intent: minimal protein, a carbohydrate-to-fat ratio optimized for immediate energy in a brief window, a palatability profile that deteriorates sharply after day 3, which in field trials caused consumption rates to drop significantly, meaning people stop eating adequate amounts because they can no longer tolerate the taste, which compounds the caloric deficit at exactly the wrong time. Military field feeding doctrine does not incorporate emergency calorie bars into any scenario extending beyond immediate evacuation. They are an evacuation tool. They belong in a vehicle and in a bag by your front door. In that role, they are appropriate and well-suited. As a pantry staple, as a meaningful portion of a family's food supply for a scenario lasting 1 to 2 weeks or more, they are the wrong tool being asked to do something they were never designed for. If they are in a bag by your front door, that is the right use. If they are on your pantry shelves as a food supply, they should be replaced with something that was actually designed for sustained use. This one is the default recommendation in nearly every entry-level preparedness community, and the gap between its reputation and its documented risks is genuinely significant. White rice as the primary caloric foundation of a food storage system. Stock rice and dried beans, the standard advice goes. Cheap, long shelf life, historically proven. All of that is factually accurate, and it is also nutritionally incomplete in a specific way that military nutrition science has documented across more than 80 years of case studies. The problem is not rice. Rice is a legitimate storage staple. The problem is rice as a primary caloric foundation, without understanding what sustained rice-heavy consumption does to the human body under stress conditions over weeks. In 1942, the United States War Department documented a clinical pattern among prisoners of war held in the Pacific Theater. Troops subsisting primarily on white rice were developing a progressive neurological and cardiovascular condition, peripheral neuropathy, cardiac complications, severe fatigue, cognitive degradation. The condition was vitamin B1 deficiency, clinically termed beriberi. It was not theoretical, it was not rare. It was documented across thousands of cases. White rice contains essentially no vitamin B1. When white rice represents more than 40% of a person's daily caloric intake over a sustained period, deficiency develops in 4 to 6 weeks under normal conditions. Under the elevated stress and disrupted sleep of a crisis scenario, the timeline compresses. Children develop symptoms faster than adults. Military ration design mandates vitamin B1 fortification in any rice-based meal component. Field ration architects do not design rice-dominant systems without it. If your storage plan centers on white rice without a dedicated supplementation strategy, you have a plan with a documented clinical failure mode built into it. The fix costs almost nothing. Dried nutritional yeast, which stores for 2 or more years properly sealed, delivers the highest natural concentration of vitamin B1 available in any storable food at a cost of pennies per day. Number 5 is among the most purchased preparedness items in any retail category, and one of the most misunderstood in terms of what it actually delivers in a crisis. Canned soup as a primary protein and calorie source. Not canned fish, not canned legumes, not canned meat. Specifically soup, the broths, the chicken noodle products, the tomato bases, the vegetable medleys that appear on nearly every beginner preparedness checklist. A standard 14-ounce can of commercial chicken noodle soup delivers approximately 180 calories. It contains between 8 and 12 grams of protein, and it contains between 900 and 1200 milligrams of sodium. That sodium number is the one that matters most under crisis conditions. Under routine daily life, the kidneys process excess dietary sodium efficiently. Under sustained crisis stress, elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep, physical exertion, psychological pressure, kidney function changes in measurable ways. The threshold at which excess sodium begins to affect blood pressure, cognitive performance, and hydration status drops substantially. Military field nutrition guidelines cap operational sodium intake at between 2,300 and 3,000 milligrams per day in sustained field environments. 2 standard cans of commercial soup puts you at your daily sodium ceiling while delivering 360 calories and fewer than 25 grams of protein. You have consumed your entire sodium budget, and you are still critically short on the calories and protein your body needs to function. Canned soup is a comfort item. It is not a caloric cornerstone. The replacement is straightforward. Canned fish, canned beans, and canned full-fat coconut milk all deliver more calories per dollar, more protein per can, and substantially better sodium to nutrient ratios. They store as long. They cost no more. They perform categorically better against every metric that matters. Item number 6 represents a vulnerability that grew directly out of the fitness community entering the preparedness market, and it has created a real nutritional gap in a substantial number of home storage systems. Commercial protein powder and powdered meal replacement products positioned as food storage solutions. The logic sounds reasonable. High protein content, extended shelf life, simple preparation, compact storage footprint. Performance athletes use these products. Why would they not transfer to emergency use? Because your body's metabolic relationship to isolated protein changes fundamentally under chronic psychological stress. When cortisol is chronically elevated, which it will be within 48 hours of any genuine extended emergency, the metabolic pathway that converts isolated protein to usable energy becomes measurably less efficient. Simultaneously, the neurological demand for complete food increases significantly. Complete food means fat, fiber, varied micronutrients, and the sensory experience of eating something your body recognizes as a meal. Protein powder was designed for post-exercise recovery in individuals who are otherwise completely and well-nourished. It was not designed as a meal replacement for people operating under chronic psychological and physical stress with disrupted sleep and no access to a functional food supply. Used as a significant meal component in a crisis, it will fail to satisfy hunger, fail to provide adequate sustained energy, and place a processing burden on the kidneys that compounds the sodium issues already present in most civilian storage systems. Military field rations contain complete food, fat sources, fiber, full macronutrient profiles, varied micronutrient content. There is no version of a military field ration built around protein concentrate. That is a deliberate design decision based on decades of operational nutrition data, not an oversight. Item number 7 gets quietly removed from military preparedness recommendations every time a food scientist reviews the data. It continues to dominate civilian preparedness content regardless. Commercially packaged survival crackers and hard biscuit products, hardtack-style items with multi-year shelf lives. They carry cultural authority in the preparedness world because they have been associated with survival scenarios since before the Civil War. That historical association has given them a credibility their nutritional profile does not support. A standard hard survival cracker delivers between 30 and 40 calories per piece. The fat content is minimal to none. The protein is negligible. The glycemic index is high, meaning blood glucose spikes sharply after consumption and drops equally sharply, creating an energy pattern that produces brief alertness followed by accelerated fatigue. In a scenario where survival crackers represent a meaningful share of daily calories, that energy cycle, spike and crash, makes sustained physical work and clear cognitive function progressively harder to maintain from one day to the next. The Civil War armies that relied on hardtack as a dietary staple experienced documented rates of malnutrition and cognitive decline that military historians and nutritionists have studied extensively. The institutional response was not to improve hardtack. The response was to replace it with more nutritionally complete ration systems. Survival crackers as a small addition to an otherwise complete meal are unproblematic. As a meaningful caloric contributor to a crisis food supply, they are one of the least efficient ways to use shelf space and preparedness budget that exist in the current market. Every dollar spent on survival crackers is a dollar that could be building actual caloric density. Item number 8 is the most divisive item on the list because it is genuinely beloved across the preparedness community, and the gap between its reputation and its real performance profile is one that most people have never examined closely. Ramen noodles stored as a budget preparedness staple. The recommendation is everywhere: low cost, lightweight, multi-year shelf life in dry storage, simple to prepare with minimal water. It appears on more entry-level preparedness lists than almost any other single product. Here is what the nutritional research shows happens to a person consuming ramen as a significant food source for more than 7 consecutive days. A single standard package of instant ramen contains between 800 and 1200 milligrams of sodium in the flavoring component alone. The noodles contribute additional sodium before any flavoring is added. At 2 packages per day, a conservative consumption rate for someone relying on ramen as a real calorie source, total sodium from ramen alone reaches between 1600 and 2400 milligrams before any other food is consumed. The caloric profile beyond the sodium problem is almost entirely refined carbohydrate. Fat content is minimal. Protein is between 4 and 8 grams per package. Micronutrient content, even with vegetable-flavored varieties, is negligible across every category that matters under stress: vitamins A, C, and B complex, iron, magnesium, potassium. Military nutrition researchers studying low-cost emergency ration options in the 1990s specifically evaluated ramen-adjacent food profiles for potential inclusion in disaster response feeding programs. The documented conclusion was that sustained consumption under stress conditions produced measurable declines in physical performance benchmarks and cognitive assessment scores within 14 to 21 days of primary reliance. 3 days of ramen during an evacuation scenario is a legitimate short-term solution. 2 weeks of ramen as a primary food strategy is a measurable physiological liability. The window between those two uses is narrower than the people selling it in bulk quantities would like you to know. The last item is the most technically nuanced on this list, and it explains why many home preparedness systems that appear complete on inspection are actually under-delivering on micronutrient needs in a way that is invisible until the consequences arrive. Single-ingredient freeze-dried vegetables stored without a dietary fat source. This requires a brief explanation of a basic nutritional mechanism that the preparedness market almost never discusses. Vitamins A, D, E, and K are fat-soluble. They require the presence of dietary fat at the same meal to cross from the digestive system into the bloodstream. In the absence of fat, these vitamins pass through the body largely unutilized, regardless of how much produce was consumed. Freeze-dried spinach, carrots, sweet potatoes, bell peppers. These are genuinely excellent storage foods with exceptional shelf lives and real nutritional profiles. The problem is not the products. The problem is a storage system that stocks them without an adequate fat source allocated to the same meals. Military ration design mandates a minimum fat content in every individual meal component. This is not for palatability. It is because military nutrition scientists understand that fat is the delivery vehicle for the micronutrients that maintain immune function, cognitive performance, and physical recovery under sustained stress. There is no military field ration that consists of a vegetable component alone. Every meal contains fat, and the fat allocation is not optional or interchangeable. A freeze-dried vegetable supply stored alongside whole-fat coconut oil in sealed containers, olive oil, or clarified butter, all of which store for between 2 and 5 years properly sealed, is a genuinely complete micronutrient delivery system. The same vegetables stored without that fat component deliver a fraction of their intended nutritional value. The components are right, the assembly is incomplete. In military logistics terms, you have the correct inventory and the wrong integration plan. None of what you just heard is an argument against building a food supply. It is an argument for building one that is informed by the same standards applied by the people whose professional responsibility is keeping human beings alive and functional under the worst supply conditions on Earth. Military nutrition science does not recommend freeze-dried bucket kits as a primary food system. It does not rely on emergency calorie bars past 72 hours. It does not build ration programs around white rice without vitamin B1 supplementation. It does not substitute protein concentrate for complete food. It does not accept ramen as a 2-week solution. The civilian preparedness market is structured differently. It is structured around products that photograph well, store neatly, and generate profit margins. There is nothing wrong with those companies in their correct application. The problem is the mismatch between how their products are marketed and how those products actually perform against military nutrition standards for sustained scenarios. The families who will be in the strongest position when a real disruption arrives are not the ones with the most product. They are the ones with the right product, stored in the right quantities, assembled according to a nutritional framework that was built for the real world rather than a retail shelf. That is the difference between a pantry built for appearances and a pantry built for function. The next video in this series covers the replacement system, the specific foods that military logistics relies on as the foundation of sustained operational nutrition. What each of them costs, where to find them at retail, how to store them correctly, and how to build a complete 90-day supply for a family of 4 for under $300 using the same cost per calorie framework that military procurement uses. If this video changed how you think about what is currently on your shelf, share it with someone whose pantry you care about. And make sure you are subscribed before that next video goes up, because the replacement system is where the real work starts.